right. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well and had a good week. Welcome to Civic Leadership Academy, second to last actual session for our graduation and reflection. Thank you all for making it this far. It's been a fun ride. Tonight, we're going to hear from the Department of City Planning, which will be, that was my first and current home in the city of Pittsburgh. So a department that is close to my heart, and they have some really cool stuff prepared for you tonight. I just wanted to go over a few things before we get started. One, our Engage PGH page is fully up to date as of yesterday. I'm not sure if any of you had noticed, I was having a little bit of trouble uploading some of our videos in our past sessions, but I think I got them all up there now. So if you missed any classes or we're having trouble with anything around Engage PGH, everything should be updated. Please reach out to me if you're having trouble with any of that. I took the liberty of signing you all up for the Office of Community Affairs newsletter. Since we will be parting ways fairly soon, I wanted to make sure that you are all able to stay updated with the city of Pittsburgh. So we do have a monthly community newsletter that goes out citywide. It just has a bunch of information about programs, services, updates, things like that. If you want to unsubscribe, you can easily unsubscribe when you get your first email. So thank you for your patience if you're somebody who hates newsletters, but I think it's worth it to stay in the know. And like I said earlier, this is our second to last class. So we have tonight, Department of City Planning. Next week, our rescheduled class with Fire and EMS. And then the following week, we will have our graduation and celebration. I will provide more details about that to you in the coming weeks, but just a reminder, you are welcome to invite friends and family to that event. We will have a guest speaker, we'll have some reflection, so it will be kind of like an interactive opportunity, and I hope you can all make it to that as well. Okay, I think I covered all of my notes. So with that, let me introduce everybody. We have Director Andrew Dash, who is the Director of City Planning, he's waving. We have Anthony Kobach, who is a senior neighborhood planner, and he's going to be talking with us about the city of Pittsburgh's comprehensive plan for DING PGH. And we are also joined by Chris Young, who is the special projects operations manager in our zoning division. So welcome to all of you, and I am going to kick it over to Director Dash to get us started.
All right, and thank you, Leah. Nice to see you all. Thanks for joining us on your evening to try to learn a little bit more around city government. Since those of us that are here from the Department of City Planning, we'll talk about our work. A lot of our work does revolve around civic engagement. I think for us, very exciting that you are here. So let me share my screen. As Leah said, I'm Andrew Dash. I am the director for the Department of City Planning. What I'll do is just give kind of a brief overview, some of the places where you might have seen us, in things that you followed around city government, or some places that you'll see us coming forward. Anthony will talk about pretty big plan for the project for the department, which is the City of Pittsburgh Comprehensive Plan. We'll talk, he'll talk a little bit around what a comprehensive plan is and what we've done to date and where we'll be looking for engagement moving forward. I'll talk a little bit around some of our neighborhood planning work. So, although we do some work citywide, we do some work specifically in neighborhoods, talk about work that we're doing, or we have been doing for the last 3 years in what's called the Eco Innovation District, which is, areas of West Oakland and Uptown. And then Chris will close out and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the permitting work that we do and some of the resources that we have available for residents, as a part of that work. So overall, what we do, our department is really focused around land use. And so the way that our city develops, the way that, our city is built, and the things that are around that. So we work on plans. We also work on policy, projects, code, all with the ultimate goal of really focusing on how we can create equitable neighborhoods, how we can create sustainable neighborhoods, uh, and how we make sure that as change happens, which change is happening here in the city of Pittsburgh, that it's happening in a way that matches the city's goals, matches residents' goals for their neighborhood. We have 5 divisions, Leah and Giselle, who you're very familiar with at this point in time, part of our community affairs division. We also have zoning and development review, which is Chris and his work. Anthony is one of our strategic planners, which is long range planning. We also house the sustainability and resilience operations for the city and manage public art and civic design. So what do planners do? This is, around that idea of land use. We do develop plans and then work with some of our fellow departments that you've already met with at this point in time to coordinate implementation. So, so our Department of Public Works or Department of Mobility and Infrastructure or Redevelopment Authority take on a lot of pieces of the planning work that we do. We are the connection to the community for a lot of our planning processes. We do work on a lot of issues around development. So whether it's you looking to get a permit for your house or PNC looking to build the next skyscraper, all of those types of operations have a permitting component to them, and that we are involved in. And we are the people that connect developers to neighborhood groups and residents. So as a part of a lot of the development that has a public process attached to it, there's a community component to that development, and our planners facilitate that. So, that happens in a number of ways. That happens from anything like citywide policy that Anthony will talk about relative to the comprehensive plan, to some of our neighborhood efforts, to changes in zoning regulations. A recent change in our zoning regulations that was large was, I'll talk about a little bit later, and then to implementation projects within public space. Just to quickly run through our divisions, our strategic planning division, again, they handle kind of long range planning, neighborhood planning, environmental planning. There are a group of 12 of folks that work in that area. Since you're working, as a part of, the Civic Leadership Academy and the Engage PGH platform, that was something that was created this past year by the Department of City Planning to coordinate engagement amongst all of our departments. We've worked a lot on development of the comp plan, which Anthony will talk about, and our neighborhood plans, where last year we were able to complete plans in Hazelwood and in Homewood, and we're able to launch some efforts in Lincoln, Leamington, East Hills, and the Hill District. We also have environmental planners that work on things like our stormwater management and how we treat stormwater as a part of development, and do park master planning with our Department of Public Works. The ADA coordinator for the city is within city planning. We have really excited to kind of initiated a disability service facilitator program, which really tries to connect, better connect the work of all city departments to the requirements that we have with the ADA. We'll talk about some of the things that'll be happening in next year with continuation of neighborhood plans, work on our comprehensive plan, and work around environmental planning. And one thing I forgot to mention was also housing. And so, there's been a lot of discussion around the fact that the city has a gap of 20,000 affordable units. That was done out of work of this department. So we were the staff to the city's affordable housing task force. We're actually right now working to update that data, based on changes in the market that have happened over the last 5 years, to make sure that we understand the issues around Pittsburghers and housing, and then work either ourselves or with others to develop solutions for that. Our sustainability and resilience team, they lead the work that we do around the climate action plan and understanding how the city and development can play a role in climate in protecting ourselves against changes in climate and protect ourselves against some of the shocks and stressors that we have either from natural means or from other means through our resilience strategy. And so we lead both internal sustainability with our fellow departments, and we lead external sustainability. So when we think about doing building benchmarking, where we're trying to understand what use, how much energy commercial buildings are using, to working on zoning regulations around that. One that was passed this past year was we did require that all city buildings be net zero, so that they are essentially not using any more energy than they're creating. And so that's something that's going on for new buildings and larger retrofits of buildings at the city scale. One thing that there's been a lot of press recently, we've been the staff in support of the mayor for the Marshall Plan for Middle America, which is looking at things at the broadest scale of how do we think of a restructuring of the economy of our region around climate, renewables, and other means as we transition not only the city, but we look at our partnerships more broadly. And so we obviously going to continue that work into 2021. Public art and civic design is a part of our work as well. And really, they manage the city's art collection that we have throughout the city. We have over 200 pieces of public art, whether that is a painting on a wall, to a memorial that we have in a park, to an intersection that we've painted. And so they manage that collection. They also staff the city's art commission, which is best thought of as maybe like a public lands commission. So anything that happens on city property that isn't something standard, if it's is something that would go to the art commission. And they work on new programming. And one of the big things that we're going to be looking as we look towards 2021 is, and we see a couple of examples of work that we recently completed here. These are some public art projects in the Beachview neighborhood as a part of improvements that we're doing that were being done to Broadway Avenue. But then looking forward, we will be continuing to do a lot of maintenance and on the current system, but then looking to establish an arts and parks program. So we'll be working with our departments of public works and city parks to actually be creating larger pieces of art in our regional parks across the city. Planning and development review, Chris will talk a little bit more about this, so I'm going to be kind of brief on this. That group, they staff our boards and commissions around development. They're the ones that that are reviewing plans based on our codes, and they're working with developers, to be able to go through that process. In 2020, obviously due to the pandemic, the same way that we're here with you virtually, we've had to make all of our boards and commissions virtual as well. And so a lot of the things that happen downtown now happen virtually, and it's been a really exciting change for us because it's actually really improved access to a lot of these things that presently happen during the day downtown. And so it's been, really exciting to be able to get that. We also, and Chris will speak more to this as well, we also have One Stop PGH, which is our online permitting system. I know if you met with PLI already, permits, licenses, inspections already, they probably talked about that as well. And so, they work on doing those reviews and working to to establish our zoning code. And so, we'll be continuing to do that into the future. And then last is our community affairs group, which Lee and Giselle are two of. They really, focus on a lot of these programs and a lot of constituent services. And, we're working, with other staff in city planning to really make our engagement online more robust. So, we have kind of, division heads over all of those groups. And, we do, since a lot of our work is around engaging communities around development or around what they want to see with their future, obviously put a lot of that information out in social media, also through the Engage PGH platform. You can dig into our website more. We do have project pages for most, if not all, of our projects, to be able to understand those processes, understand where projects are in a process, and understand some of the plans and products that we have. So, any questions before I turn over to Anthony?
I'm not seeing any.
All right. Sorry,
I have one.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to ask what you had mentioned about the ADA.
Yes.
Do you have a committee that works on that, or is it ADA just following the guidelines? Could you explain that?
We do. So we have a disability coordinator, and her name is Hillary Roman. And then and we have what's called the City County Task Force on Disabilities. And so they're a group that meet monthly. The task force members are picked both by the mayor and the county executive. And they talk about it. They meet every Monday. I think it's the third Monday of the month at 2 o'clock. I can put the link for their site in the chat. And they discuss disability issues. And so one of their roles is to advocate for disability issues, from the community's perspective. Then our ADA coordinator both works with the City County Task Force, but then also works with the departments across the city around issues of disability as well. And so usually those are, the work that we do is really around non-personnel issues. So it's more around, if we're dealing with things like sidewalk obstructions, or if we're, connecting residents to handicap parking resources, or if there are disability issues with a public project that the city's doing, the ADA coordinator plays a role in those projects.
Well, I would like to know, do you have any residents or committee members on these boards?
We do, and what I'll do is, like I said, I'll put the link in the chat for you, and it has a list of the members of the task force that are on that group.
And my third final question is the staff there at the City of Pittsburgh in your departments trained on ADA or interacting with people with disabilities? Is there training, or you just come on and just catch on?
No, absolutely. A lot of us that are planners on the team, obviously there's education that we continue to do. In addition, since we have our ADA coordinator, one of the things that I had talked about with relative to her role specifically is the Disability Service Facilitator Program. Her job is obviously focused on issues around planning for persons with disabilities, so really it's her job. Part of her job is training not only other city planners, but other members of city government in some of our other departments. And this is a program that we just started instituting at the end of last year, actually based off of a program that New York City had pioneered, and really want to use that to be able to focus the work of all of our departments a little bit more intentionally around some of the issues of persons with disabilities.
And one final question. In the language that's used in your department concerning ADA laws or people with disabilities, are the words so used in handicap that's interchanged with disabilities?
I don't know that I understand the question.
Well, it might be me personally, but I have heard, I think that the word handicap leaves a label, and that, they're starting to use different languages and terminology for describing these disabilities, not as in a full handicap, having everybody in one group. It's like like a child has an IEP, individual, but then you do collective
Mhm.
as in people with different, or people with disabilities, or people physically disabled. To use the word handicap is now, I mean, I think it's framed as a labeling.
Yeah, I mean, primarily what we discuss is that we're working with, with people with that have disabilities, and that is a pretty broad spectrum. That can be auditory disabilities, that can be physical disabilities, that can be visual disabilities, that can be mental, I mean, it does run a pretty broad spectrum. I mean, one of the roles of the City County Task Force is that, our members do represent that, we try as much as possible to make sure that they represent as broad of a spectrum as possible, so that we are, because it is our role to represent to represent planning around all those types of disabilities.
I appreciate it and thank you. And I just wanted to, bring notes to the language that you use.
All right.
Can
Thanks,
I
Andrea.
put that in the chat box? I mean, put in you said you'll put that
Yes, I put a link to the City County Task Force on Disabilities in the chat, and I'll put one to the ADA office as well.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I think we can move forward to our next piece, and then obviously we'll be on for a while if there are further questions for the director.
All right, thanks.
Anthony, I think you're up.
Okay, hello everyone, good evening. I'm going to share my screen briefly and then make sure that this works. If everyone can see the logo. As Director Dashin mentioned, I'm the project manager for an exciting project for the city as a whole, and especially being led by the department, Forging PGH. I'm hoping everyone has heard of the project thus far. It's the city's comprehensive plan, building our comprehensive plan. I wanted to start with a couple of quotes, one from Mayor Peduto and as well as Director Dash, to kind of encapsulate what is the spirit of this project. The mayor says, with our people and our planet at its center, Forging PGH guides planning and development for the city of Pittsburgh through a shared vision for the future. This community-driven plan with equity at its foundation will continue to make Pittsburgh a place for all. And Director Dash goes on to say, Forging PGH is the first comprehensive look at land use in the city of Pittsburgh. This process will develop a plan for and by the people of Pittsburgh towards future growth for our city that is equitable and beneficial for all. You notice a little theme there that there's equity comes up in both comments, of vision and land use. I know that term land use can be a little confusing, or exactly what does that mean? This next slide that you're looking at right now is the current land use, existing land use for the city of Pittsburgh. There's over 143,000 parcels of land in the city, and it all is doing something. Even if it's not doing anything, it has a land use category. It would be a vacant category. And I want to kind of zoom away from that into a little interactive tool that we have on our Forging PGH project website. But you notice, the biggest parcels that kind of jump out to everyone, or at least jumps out to me, is the large green swaths of land. And those are open space areas, whether they're existing parks or they could be just parklets or greenways. It's labeled as open space, and it has a green label. It's kind of hard to see at this level, zooming out for the city. So let me jump away from that image for a second. And this little handy tool, depending on what neighborhood you live in, I just zoomed into Troy Hill because it's there's a part of the neighborhood that has an island, Washington's Landing, And you can see from this map, and if you can see my cursor here, there's three kinds of land uses going on currently in this area. The kind of the western tip or the far left tip is yellow, and that's residential. And then you have it's either 1, 2, or 3 family. The red area is commercial, and this bluer area, hatched area, is institutional. And if you're familiar with this neighborhood or this specific area of the city, in the residential area, you have mainly townhome developments. But why isn't there 40-foot apartment towers or single-family homes on 3 acres? I'll talk a little bit about that in the project, but then also maybe Chris will touch on it in zoning review, and also Director Dash kind of mentioned that zoning does shape development. And I'm going to go now back to the slide presentation, and I'm going to go through an overview of the project. The project team consists of, led by Director Dash and as the planning director, myself as the project manager, but there's a lot of city staff either within the Department of City Planning, the different divisions, or even the Transportation Department, which is the Office of Mobility and Infrastructure. There's a handful of people here. So it's a really large group of people that are assisting in this project. As well, we have a handful of consultants. This screen kind of looks like, you know, the side of a NASCAR with all these different logos, but these consultants are doing various things throughout the project that maybe either assist our capacity in the department, or it's some such unique expertise that we contract for it. And I'll touch on some of those as well in this presentation. So what is a comprehensive plan? The definition we give, and that all cities and communities throughout the country kind of approach comprehensive plans in a general way, is you can think of it as who and what we are today and what we aspire to be. And comprehensive plans are documents with maps and tables and data, but they include objectives for land use, transportation, economic development, housing. I said, you know, parks, you know, just a whole host of things. There really is some variety in what is all contained in a comprehensive plan, but purpose is really, it gets to the heart of each community that does this. They want to provide a framework, not only for legislators, council, but for developers that come into our community and want to make money, but also you know, develop a product that they could be proud of, and that people are interested in purchasing or being a part of. And also for community members, whether it's neighborhood groups, ensuring certain developments are happen the way that they see their neighborhood looking. But the idea, and I don't know why this next bullet point, it was supposed to say ability. I don't know how that happened, but ability to plan development in a sustainable and beneficial way. And that kind of speaks directly to our sustainability and resilience division, about how we tackle or kind of counter climate change, and just being environmentally conscious, you know, across all facets of development. Comprehensive plans are also precursors to zoning code updates, and from year to year, or how often communities look at capital improvements, it helps guide and shape those decisions year after year. Some quick ways to just describe 4G and PGH to friends, neighbors, or, you know, how they say, like an elevator speech, you know, you got a couple, you know, 10 seconds to explain this project, this massive project. Here's a couple of quick ways. it's a strategic framework for vision and growth and development through the year 2040. So that's something to keep in mind. This project, this plan, it has some short-term components to it or guideposts, but it is a generational plan. It's a 20-year plus outlook in the city. So you want to think big, you want to think long-term, and it is this roadmap for our future. And you could also describe it as a mission statement. This is the city's first ever comprehensive land use plan. There have been other forms or shapes of plans in the past and on a citywide level, but this is truly the first time that it's being done in this manner. And that's part of what makes this, this project really exciting. And it is this shared vision from all citizens and residents coming together to define what that is. And also to keep in mind that it is this overarching policy document, and it has to be somewhat generally based because it is at a citywide level. 3 frameworks that we use in the plan that help us not only throughout the planning process and in the planning document itself, but also as we try to look for the success of the plan and monitoring its performance. I'll touch a little bit more on the Displacement Vulnerability Index. It's called the DVI, and it's a way that we could look at, in many cases, historically overlooked populations or communities within Pittsburgh that in previous planning efforts have been harmed by those either good intentions or flat out racist practices that is not unique to Pittsburgh. It's happened in many communities across the country, and acknowledging that, recognizing it, and trying to ensure and prevent any type of issues like that going forward. Everyone should be very familiar with the P4 initiative with People, Planet, Place, and Performance. It's a partnership with the Heinz Endowment to have sustainable and equitable growth going forward in our city. And then the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're proud to say that Pittsburgh was the second city in the country to adopt those goals and really take environmental concerns seriously. As I mentioned before, there has been past planning practices, but some recent efforts are very important for us to either not only to consider, but try to include as we move forward in our Forging PGH planning efforts. So this just kind of gives a timeline. It doesn't touch on absolutely every one of them, but we don't, I guess what we try to say is we don't plan in a vacuum. There's been 4 other previously adopted neighborhood plans. So, and many of you maybe on the call are part of these neighborhoods and have experienced giving their input and their vision to their community. And that's to say that through this citywide process, that work is not ignored. It's actually baked into and infused into the Forging PGH process. So this map shows a map of the city and just kind of highlights those in the dark shaded areas, the 4 neighborhood plans that were already adopted, the 2 in yellow, the Hill District and Oakland, are current processes going on right now. I guess in an ideal world, there wouldn't be any planning before a comprehensive plan, and then neighborhood plans could happen, but it doesn't work like that. So plans start and stop at different times based on different departments' visions, the mayor, the administration. But we're a very robust and, as Director Dash said, very well staffed department, and we're looking forward to great planning to not only that's going on, but to continue it through this process. This little graphic just shows how that smallest little graphic up there is an image of downtown, and how it fits into, whoops, I went forward by accident, how it fits into downtown has a mobility plan going on, and how it's going to fit into the city's planning efforts, whether it's the Forging PGH comprehensive plan or DOMI's 2070 transportation vision. All of those plans kind of work together, and we acknowledge them in the Forging PGH process. And it carries even further. The city fits within the county and their long-range planning efforts that are currently going on. I don't know why the stars are aligned, but there's multiple, comprehensive plans going on at different levels. And also at the regional level, the 10 county Metropolitan Planning Organization has a planning effort as well that we're acknowledging and really all meeting with each other on a regular basis to make sure our plans don't conflict with one another, or that we have conversations about things. And I'll talk about some of those conversations in a little bit. Ultimately, the images to the left is kind of like a deck of cards. They all kind of come together, whether it's neighborhood plans, county and regional plans, sector plans like transportation, and these land use scenarios that I'll talk about for Forging PGH into the image on the right, which is a future land use map, which is blank right now because we're in the process, and that's the exciting part about, what is the future? What is everyone going to kind of want to see for their neighborhoods going forward over the next 20 years? The conditions and trends report, I'll just touch on briefly, but as this subheading says, how events of the past shaped Pittsburgh and why they will inform our citywide plan. Good planning has to look at the past and has to look at current trends and data as we look to plan for the future. Continuing that with that P4 theme, this report that came out in March that was kind of held back because of the pandemic, has the P4 framework structure of people, planet, place, and performance, and talks about a handful of things. In the intro chapter, it just kind of talks about the arc of development in the city, the Industrial Revolution, the explosion of growth and population through the 1930s, and it kind of levels off through the 50s, and then the slow decline, but steady decline through, and you can see how this line of population change over time in the 2000s starts to level off, and we're at a point now where, again, our collaboration I talked about at the regional level, Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission has their own projections of population growth through the year 2040. So you can see that the chart takes from the year 2017 through 2040. The blue line is pretty strong growth over the next few decades. Our planning team came in with the orange line, which is a little more reserved or conservative estimate. But in either case, you're looking at anywhere from 15 to 40,000 new people potentially coming to, again, projected to come to the city over these next 20 years. And it translates into growth in jobs as well, anywhere from 10 to 40,000 jobs, depending on which forecast you go by. So with that, you want to plan for this growth, and that's what Forging PGH is doing. But in this conditions and trends report, as I mentioned, we talk about things like things that have harmed communities because of planning practices or business policies, redlining, kind of carving out communities that weren't able to get bank loans for homes. Just acknowledging those neighborhoods in Pittsburgh are still struggling with coming back in some cases because of those historic problems that we've experienced. The housing cost burden is real in the city, but when you break it down by tenure, like ownership or renter, and then by race, you have renters have a 41% cost burden, but if you're in the Black community and you rent, your cost burden goes up to 50%. So these are things that we want to see how can we through this planning process correct those. And I'll touch on that with some of the engagement data that we've collected thus far. We also acknowledge that the air and water quality in Pittsburgh has made great strides in improving, but we still have more work to go. Even Mayor Peduto has said that there's some businesses that won't come to Pittsburgh until we clean our air and clean our water. So 4G PGH will try to create this vision and that capacity to address that issue. Pittsburgh is really, in many sectors starting to grow and come back, whether it's education, which is really consistently been strong, or the medical field. But you see this gap in blue collar working and manufacturing jobs where they continue to decline over these last few decades while the other sectors increase. How do we, not only acknowledge that, but how does 4G PGH address opportunity for all citizens and all educational backgrounds and skill sets? So I'm going to touch on briefly the engagement piece that we've done in this first phase that is completed, and hope many of you have been a part of it. The first thing that we had started, even before we actually launched the planning process, this was back in January and February, it was a survey that was done for all Pittsburgh residents. The only requirement was you have to be 18 years or older and live in the city, but it was statistically significant because it was random. And the survey asked Pittsburghers their perceptions of what the city currently stands for and what they want it to stand for. And then what we did was we kind of looked at those gaps or those differences, and then are using those results to lay the groundwork to help to start to establish these priorities in the plan and some of the evaluation criteria that we'll touch on. So some of the things that were positive is people said that they love Pittsburgh. They're just very proud of the city, and it provides lots of opportunities. And here's some of the comments from the people that we had heard from. But what's ironic is the same people that say there's opportunity, other people say there's inequality, and they have concerns with race issues or progress in Pittsburgh. So how do we reconcile those differences? And Pittsburgh's different to different people, but our values gap analysis brought up these three things. Of the top three future values, so what Pittsburgh, what people want it to be, clean and safe water was noted as the most important future value, but it's also something that Pittsburghers today think we're not doing very well. So again, just fascinating data to kind of sift through. Also, creating opportunities for residents is the most important value to focus on, because there's a significant gap between the value of what people think of it today and how they value it in the future. And then the last analysis that we came up with was making progress in reducing poverty, investing in neighborhoods without displacing residents, and facilitating affordable housing were very low rated current values that ranked very high in future importance. So we might not be doing a good job at that today, but the idea is that we want, community members want us to be doing a better job in the future with it. So 4G PGH can focus in on that. So some of the engagement that happened in this first phase with the pandemic, the launch in March, with the conditions and trends report was held back for September. So on September 1st, we had the Mayor Peduto's news conference, and 7 major either TV or news outlets covered the story, and there was a big splash about it. And in that, we unveiled the name and the logo and the project, the project webpage, 4gpgh.org, the conditions and trends report, and the online engagement, and then the timeline for the project. So I'm going to touch on a little bit of that now. The online workshop was about a month and a half long, and it was a survey and then an interactive mapping tool where it asked people where would they like to see certain development happen in the city. There was a little video that described basically the things that I'm covering now, like growth is happening, but it can't maybe happen everywhere. Where do you want it to be concentrated? Does you like your neighborhood the way it is, quiet and not very developed, or do you need or want development? Questions like that. But we also recognize, again, because of those historic communities that are overlooked, we wanted to make a concerted effort or an intentional effort to go into, we identified 6 areas of the city that we called vulnerable populations. And what we mean by vulnerable, it means they have higher than average residents that either have lower incomes, less education, are members of community of color, or they rent their home. Again, displacement can happen to homeowners and renters, but we felt even more so the rental population is the most easily displaced when development happens. So in these concentrated areas, we had the same online workshop, but they were small, invited groups of people. Unfortunately, they had to be online. But I mean, we're just making the best of it in the pandemic. And we would take them through the online workshop, but in a much more intimate fashion. There was a conversation, and we would type in comments to the map for them, just to make sure that people understood it. But then also after that, those 6 focus group meetings, we encourage people to tell their families and friends and neighbors to go back and take the online workshop if they want to, spread the word. So the whole idea was getting the word out about this project. Another community that historically in processes is overlooked are new immigrant and refugee populations. So with our efforts with Welcoming Pittsburgh, we created a specific focus group for that population to, again, participate in that online workshop. Here are some of the numbers behind it. We had about 460 people in that values survey. And the numbers here is for the online survey or the workshop, that kind of red text in the middle that said an intercept survey. We wanted to take the online survey out to libraries, grocery stores, bus stops, and talk to people, again, who maybe didn't hear the big splash of news in the news conference, or read newspapers, or do much of social media, or maybe just missed the ads or the outreach that was given. It was another opportunity, but due to the COVID issues and protocols, we decided to not approach that. But in this next phase, we are going to take that up again. Let me go over the project timeline real quick, and then try to wrap it up here. In September was the launch. In January, we're establishing working groups. These are practitioners, community members, but they're in one of these 6 areas: in housing, mobility, equity, economic development, recreation and open space, or environment and energy, to help and assist and be a sounding board or a check throughout the planning process for these different deliverables that come up, or things before they would kind of be launched to the general public on. And you can also think of those sections as like chapters or themes within 4G and PGH. In June, as you get more toward the middle of the arrow, we're going to come back out to the public with various alternative scenarios to select. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment here. What are these scenarios? And then we're going to refine and select. I say I'm saying the community picks a preferred scenario, and that gets kind of turned into this future land use map that I had talked about earlier. And then in December, or towards the end of the year, unveil the draft comprehensive planning document with the maps and the data, the tables, and this vision for the future. And then into early next year, go through the formal adoption process. So there's multiple phases of public engagement, and the next one coming up is in June. So what is scenario planning? Not everyone approaches comprehensive plans with scenarios, and you can't think of scenarios as actual plans, but instead you can think of them as they're tests or what if scenarios. The box above, people typically say, oh, assumptions today in a planning approach, and this is our future. In scenario planning, we're going to infuse these other forces, these exterior forces, and test them in futures A, B, or C. And that's where we get into when I say the word alternative scenarios. So for example, you could think of like an external force of population growth. Through scenario planning, we would ask, well, where do we grow? Future A would maybe look like a different growth model than B or C. And then through those conversations, the community picks which one they like the best. Or maybe it's a blend. It's not A, B, or C, it's D, which is a little bit of A and a little bit of C, or whatever that is. And then what spits out or comes out of the process of forging PGH is the future land use map, housing policies, and other things. Same thing you can think of for the external force of climate change. Scenario planning would be, how do we reduce greenhouse gases? And then the policy from that would be in the Forging PGH document. So that kind of gives you a high level, quick example of it. So we're going to have a trend scenario, which is just basically if Pittsburgh didn't do anything, just kept doing what they've been done in a trend, there's going to be a scenario. But then the alternative scenarios are up to 3, or actually that's what we're going to create, these 3 alternative ones. And they kind of are shaped through those workshops and focus groups that I had talked about. That's going to be the bottom right circle is in June is when we kind of unveil those and ask people to pick their preferences or give feedback on. And then we get to the preferred vision, which translates into those future land use map in the document. So I'll put these in the chat, these links, but we really hope that people continue to be engaged, or if you really are just hearing about this for the first time, visit forgingpgh.org. That's the project website. It has everything we talked about and more. The engagement platform, Engage PGH, has a specific Forging PGH project page. It's actually the first one. It's the upper left corner. You can see it, and that's going to be when we approach June or this next public engagement piece. You could go there, and we might be in person, but we're still going to have an online component where if you can't make it to those meetings to give your feedback, you could do it online as well. And that's my contact information I'll put in the chart, and I'll take any questions or continue with the presentation.
Okay, let's see. It's like we do have some questions. Matt?
You just said that those working groups were being created in January. I was just wondering if it's still possible to be a part of those.
Yeah, good question. I mentioned that they're practitioner based, and I guess what I mean by that is these are people or organizations that have been involved with the previous planning efforts that they would speak to in these working groups, or if there's programs that are currently going on in organizations with those. So I didn't want, if people thought that they were more public based, like, hey, I want to join, we try to keep them small and linked to an actual plan or a program. So, I mean, I don't know your background, Matt, but if you're part of an organization or a previous plan, but we did try to go through, if you go to the tools and resources page on Project PGH, there's a good 40 plus plans, and there's a member that is directly representative of those, and they're on the working group. So, but thanks for the question. We do get that often, and that's a point of clarification.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Let's see, Jacob.
Anthony, thanks for that presentation. 2 questions, if it's okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned at the very beginning that both the director and the mayor mentioned the reality of equality, and I'm just curious how you define that in terms of this project, and maybe I missed it when you were giving it. And my second question is, this is great, I think, and I have heard of Forging PGH, but only because I'm a part of this Civic Leadership Academy. So my question is, like, what is the communications plan to get the word out there, to get people involved?
Yeah, 2 great questions, and I'll try to answer them briefly, but we can talk for a while on both of them. Equity, as it's defined, is with that land use or development lens, but it does go beyond that. And the conditions and trends report talks about certain times where, like environmental justice, and why are a lot of the pollutions happening in low-income communities. So that's an equity problem that's identified through the conditions and trends report. So that's how we, so now how do we address that? Or in the tools and resources page that I mentioned, there's a list of different programs or plans. And Director Dash might speak more to this, though, is My Brother's Keeper is, and I don't know everything about all the plans. That's why this is a collective effort. I think that one speaks more to workforce development and access to jobs as a plan or a program. And there is a person that's on the Economic Development Working Group that is linked back to that job. So everything in that plan needs to, in a land use development type of way, get pulled forward in Forging PGH. And if there's any gaps in the planning process, we'll add to that. That's a good question. People do ask, how is equity kind of defined? And as far as our outreach, I'm trying to think the actual tab. I don't know why I lost it right now. If you go to, I know why I can't get to it. It's the Get Involved page, the Get Involved tab on Forging PGH. And at the very bottom of the page, it lists our public engagement strategy. And the problem with it is, if you don't hear about it, you didn't hear about it. And I don't care how good your communications is, it could be better. And we know that, and we strive to be better. We have a social media presence. We put ads in all types of local publications, but there's also a budget, so we couldn't necessarily advertise everywhere. I always joke in the office about, putting a billboard out of the plan. And in a previous job and in a planning effort, we did that, but it was also funded from an external source. So there's social media, there's print, this is a quick example of just how the power of networking works. Is I'm a neighborhood planner, and I have contacts with about 15 or so neighborhood groups in my coverage area. I sent out an email to all of them when the project kicked off. And one group in particular, I know for a fact, has 150 members. So my one email to them goes to that organization. That organization sends it out to 150 people. Hopefully those 150 people even share it more. But if you don't get the email, it went to spam, or you're just busy and you overlook it, the idea through marketing and Leah with community affairs, you just keep communicating. Actually, the community affairs newsletter we had a blurb on there. So we get the word out, and the answer, we can always do better. So any suggestions with networks and outlets, let us know. But thanks, those are great questions, and I don't want to hog any more time for Chris that's coming up. Sorry.
I think around equity, one of the things that we found, not only in the conditions and trends report, but in other work that's been done by the city, whether it's looking at our gender equity commission report or others, is that, equity around, there are a lot of issues of equity that we have to take in consideration. The issue of race is pretty intersectional to most of the things that if you look at the places where, where there's a difference in kind of outcome, that unfortunately in Pittsburgh, by race, it is typically worse for Black Pittsburghers or Black Pittsburgh than it is for white Pittsburgh. And so there are a lot of places for us to consider equity. That is a major one, and I think that the data is really kind of showing that as we think about planning. And then thank you to Leah for putting in the chat. We did create a public engagement plan for the comprehensive plan. And, a planner that no longer works for us used to say, you can never drive, you can't drive directly into everyone's living room to tell them all the things that you want to hear from them on. But what we try to do is just spread it in as many ways as possible. Hoping that, obviously, that residents, will be engaged with us, because everything that we do is made better by citizen and resident engagement. And, and the more viewpoints that we can get from residents, the better our work is.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, as we mentioned, I did put the link to the Forging PGH website and the public engagement plan that you can find on there in the chat. Just
you beat me to it.
Oh yeah, just two little points there. The city also has a public engagement guide, and this is sort of at the intersection of a lot of things we just talked about, that has an equity statement within it that was worked on by kind of like a coalition of community members, our Office of Equity, which is housed in the mayor's office, and the Department of City Planning, that sort of acknowledges challenges, equity challenges within public engagement, just to start, like even if we're not talking about Forging PGH or a specific project. So there's a lot of layers to it, but it's something that the city is very aware of and is thinking about. We do have an Office of Equity. It lives within the mayor's office, and there's a number of staff people who are kind of dedicated to working with departments throughout the city, kind of pushing that work in citywide. So we do have like a gender equity commission, our Welcoming Pittsburgh initiative. There's a staff person for that. My Brother's Keeper. A lot more. So just like a little piece, a little view into how that work is kind of looked at. And I will let Larry, I think we have one more question from Larry, and then we can move on.
Thanks, Leah. I also have two questions, and if you want me to hold one for later, it's fine.
No, that's fine.
They're unrelated, so I will ask one at a time. I participated in DOMI's Vision 2070 forum, and lots of cool stuff was talked about. There's no shortage of great ideas, but the big takeaway for me from that whole presentation was that Pittsburgh grew to be a city of 700,000 people, and we're spread out and topographically challenged, so stuff is not cheap to build. And right now we're running about half that number, and your projections show that we're still going to be in the vicinity of half that population level 20 years from now. So we don't have the money to do all that cool stuff. It's a chicken and egg problem. I'm in the Strip. I deal with a lot of the tech companies that are trying to recruit people here, and we're building housing so they can live here, because otherwise they have to have cars, because public transit is not what it should be. And the clear impression was, we're not going to have the money to follow the "if you build it, they will come" plan. So I'd like your comments on that.
Sure. Anthony, do you want me to answer that, or do you want to?
Yeah, go. I was gonna say something, but I was gonna say, I know direct, you'd have something, but just go ahead for the essence of time. Go ahead.
So, I mean, you're absolutely right, Larry. We were a city of 670,000. We're now a city of 305,000. And as Anthony shows, even in 20 years, we may be a city of 340,000, but that's, obviously very different. Couple of things with that. Households are very different now. So, I mean, one of the things that we're seeing is that even though Pittsburgh's population is steady, our household count is going up because, occasionally there will be multiple children running around behind me. I have 3 kids, but I am an anomaly, and kind of, people of, kind of younger age ranges in Pittsburgh, and that, there aren't as many larger there aren't as many larger families. There are a lot of single and 2-person households here in the city that we're seeing. When we were 670,000, I think our average household size at the time was 4.5. So there is some difference there. At the same time, definitely still a lot of decline overall. Another thing, and actually I'm going to talk about it, we talk about neighborhood planning, is one of the ways to get those things is how we structure our codes and our development regulations to make sure that when developers are coming in, the developers are providing amenities that residents want to see. And so, understanding that government can't do it all, and the city can't do it all out of its own budget, whether that's requiring affordable housing or whether that's transportation improvements or other things. One of the things, and I'll talk to a little bit more, is just how we use these plans to create development regulations that then start to get us those things that we're asking for. But we need to go through these planning processes to really understand what it is that residents want to see, so we can make sure that we're targeting those things when we're asking for those out of developers.
I think if we're waiting for developers to build light rail or water taxi terminals or some of the other things that everybody likes, I think we're going to be waiting a long time.
And one thing that I won't talk to in my presentation, but is related to that, is we actually work with we're working right now, for example, on different kinds of scenarios for improvements like that and taxing bodies relative to improvements like that. We have what's called the TRID, which is Transit Revitalization Investment District. We have really the only functional one in the state of Pennsylvania around East Liberty Station. And what that does is when new development comes on, they pay an increment, an increment of their taxes go into that fund, which then funds transportation improvements and funds affordable housing. And, so we're right now working in the planning on doing something very similar around the Allegheny Station in the north side, which is the station nearest Heinz Field and the casino. Understanding that there are large investments still to go on in that area, where we might be able to, as development comes, have those tax increment come into a pool of funds that the city can then work to fund those types of improvements. So there are options like that that are available, and we're definitely trying to hit as many of them as we can. Because we do understand, the restrictions on our tax base, and pandemic has made those even tighter.
How would a neighborhood go about creating a TRID?
Well, so I'm going to wait, and I'm going to answer your question as a part of my presentation.
Thank you. Question 2 is about air and water quality. I was very happy to hear you discuss that as a priority. And my question is, and my concern is, what do you do about the factors that are beyond your control? Example, a cracker plant in one county over that it's going to affect everybody downstream, and the river valleys consolidate and confine the particulate matter. So we're just stuck with whatever our neighbors do. Another example would be the railroads. Lots of issues there as far as land use, but just looking at air quality, they can do whatever they want. And discussions that some that I've been involved with, trying to get them to even change to hybrid turbine engines. They just roll their eyes. You know, they're not going to do it. They don't have to do it. The idea of electrifying the lines coming through, you know, the Fort Wayne and Pittsburgh lines, where they're planning to increase traffic about 8-fold. They're just going to use diesels because they don't invest. What do we do? Because those are the sources that really impact our air quality in a big way.
Yeah, and that's a really big question. With, you know, where there, you're right. I mean, there are certain places where we can control, and we try to control in those ways at the department level. Then obviously the mayor has a different role in the position that he can take, you know, on an advocacy role as a politician. And so, you know, I mean, you know, that is a role that, you know, I mean, these are obviously things that are of great concern to our mayor, and he has, you know, spoken, you know, I think quite a bit, you know, around them and around trying to advocate for, you know, for some of those decisions that are made beyond our borders. You know, while then, you know, work that the department has done, you know, in concert with the mayor around things like the Marshall Plan for Middle America, you know, where, you know, the intention is to try to think about how, you know, the Appalachian region can shift to a cleaner economy, you know, and thinking about those things on a very, you know, on a very regional scale, things that the department does on a citywide scale, like our climate action plan, you know, that sets forth our targets, you know, our targets for, you know, for greenhouse gas reduction and some of those things, you know, and works on the ways to achieve it. So our sustainability and resilience team, you know, is out there getting grants to do electric vehicle charging for our internal fleet, for example, as a way that we can control it. When I talk about zoning in Uptown, we changed the zoning to encourage buildings to use renewables, to connect to district energy systems, or to actually, you know, to reduce their energy usage as a way for them to get extra height in a building. You know, and getting to, you know, and having discussions around some of those trade-offs. You know, when we think about water quality, especially around storm events, and, you know, and how we treat properties in floodplains, or how we handle stormwater management. There's a lot of those things that we handle at a department level, like I said, where there's some things that are really more an advocacy level that really, you know, lend more to the work of the mayor.
Okay, thanks and good luck.
Yeah.
We need you too, Larry.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so sorry, Matt, I think we have 2 more presentations to get to. So let's I think, are we transitioning to neighborhood plan?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So, you know, Anthony showed this graphic a little bit earlier, talking about some of the places where we've done neighborhood planning and are doing neighborhood planning. You know, one of the things to highlight here is where we've done neighborhood planning. The places that we've focused on neighborhood planning have been either areas where there's the opportunity for catalytic development. So when we think about Uptown in the Eco Innovation District, it was around the completion of BRT and bus rapid transit. Or you know, thinking about Hazelwood and the completion of the Hazelwood Green site, or they're in weaker markets that are near stronger markets, and that's when we think about areas like Manchester and Chateau in the north side, or we think about Homewood and its adjacency to East Liberty and Larimer and some of the things that are going on there. And really, the focus of our neighborhood planning is really to help work with residents to create a vision for those neighborhoods before development comes in a significant way, so that that resident vision can then guide what actions happen when development comes. So there's a lot of partners that we're working with when we're creating neighborhood plans, including you all and other engaged residents, like I said, which are really, really important to the process. I'm just going to walk through an example just to talk about how we create a neighborhood plan, what it addresses, and what happens after we're done with the neighborhood plan, just to give you an idea of what that is. And so I'm going to focus on the Eco Innovation District. This is an area in, that's kind of in the Uptown neighborhood, which contains Duquesne University, contains UPMC Mercy, and is primarily the 5th and Forbes corridor between downtown and Oakland. What happened was there were a lot of plans for a bus rapid transit system at the time, and the community really said, "What's in it for us?" You have these changes to buses for us in Uptown. However, at the same time, bus service is good for us, but we've got these other problems that need to be addressed. We've got environmental problems. We need open space. We've got a lot of people sitting on, tearing down buildings and putting surface parking lots up, but not really investing in the neighborhood. How do we change that? And so, we worked with the community, as we worked through their problems. One of the ways that they wanted to focus on the eco districts model, really trying to think about equity and environment as a focus for resident engagement and for the structure of the plan that they developed. They're also, just given their position between Oakland and downtown, and with some of the startups that already had gone into Uptown, wanted to focus on an innovation district model as well, trying to think about how we capitalize on, on the universities and the emerging tech centers that we have in Pittsburgh, and trying to incorporate that into Uptown. So our area is, again, primarily in the neighborhood of Uptown, which does have a significant institutional presence, but also has a lot of other assets in the neighborhood. Had a lot of project partners through that, whether it was the funding that we had, which we got from the Federal Transit Administration, because part of this was around the Bus Rapid Transit project, but then a lot of community and institutional partners. With this and all of our neighborhood plans, really that focus on consistency with other efforts is a priority. And public involvement, again, is, and these are all photos from our Uptown public engagements, is really important towards the work that we do. So whether that's holding focus groups with community members, interviewing them directly, having surveys, having public events, it's around trying to reach people in as many ways as we can. So, we worked with communities and our partners to create a plan. Really, the one thing that they wanted, the 4 goals are really set here around environment, around allowing everyone to benefit in the change that happened in Uptown. They really wanted to see themselves as a model for more sustainable development. And they were really proud of the neighborhood that they had. And they wanted to think about how that gets respected as the neighborhood changes. So, we created, the plan that kind of consisted of, the concepts, so like the big picture of Uptown, but then trying to get into actions as well to make sure that we have a way to get there. So just some of those big things that came up through the planning process, really dealing with this issue of vacancy. Safety was more a perceived safety issue, I think, than, as we dug through police numbers, actually an actual public safety issue. So, in that, working to, create some open spaces to change public space, to make things safer, to make the street network safer in the neighborhood, where some, thinking about bus rapid transit and how bus rapid transit is going to happen, that it happens in a way that then has community amenities assigned to it. So they really wanted tree plantings. They really wanted, the BRT system to provide stormwater relief in some places for flooding issues that residents were seeing. Thinking about ways to change some of the edges of their community. This is obviously not what the Boulevard of the Allies looks like, But one of the things that came out of the plan was really trying to think about long-term, a bigger, longer-term project, trying to redesign the Boulevard of the Allies to be able to create an amenity out of it for uptown residents. Looking at energy, and so one of the things that came through our climate action plan, is this idea of district energy systems and ways that we can connect to them. Right in the middle is listed the NRG plant. That is a new district energy system that was created. So trying to think about ways that the residents and others can connect to that plant and new development connect to that plant, so that new development that does come on is more sustainable. And thinking about ways that parking can better serve the district. A lot of uptown is surface parking lots, primarily for things like like PPG Paints Arena. And so, when we think about new structured parking that was going on, this is just a drawing of all the amenities. But when we get to the requirements, there were a number of things that were required if you were going to build new parking in the district, where you're providing part of a menu of options, and this is all of the menu of options that's there, but that each parking each parking structure in the district would create some of these amenities, and we're starting to see some of those actually go in. Working on both sustainability and affordability, and thinking about that through the zoning code. So zoning, as we move into we'll move into Chris, and his presentation is where we focus on the regulation of land from developers and applicants. So when new development happens, it's determining whether it's in conformance with our zoning code. And so how do we use the zoning code to implement community goals was really something that we were thinking about in Uptown. So when we go to write zoning code, obviously as we create these plans, then we're using those to provide guidance to create new zoning. That's going to go through a legislative process through our planning commission, and ultimately be determined to be adopted by city council. So again, looking at Uptown, what we did was create the Uptown Public Realm District as kind of the way to implement the plan, the Eco Innovation District plan. The community said that they were interested in having denser development there. They said that that wasn't a problem, that they were seeing, the potential for new development, but they wanted to make sure that if new development happened, that it was, something that was energy efficient, that it was something that was providing affordable housing, that it was encouraged sustainable development, or it was respecting their character. And so, in Uptown before, we did this zoning, like many neighborhoods, there's just a hodgepodge of many different zones in an area. So, you see the 9 different zones that, the small area of Uptown consisted of at that point in time, all of the different regulations that were in play, where some places you could have no more than 40 feet, some places you could have 400 feet, all in the same neighborhood. And so, but what happened is that with that, the development that the community wanted all required variances, or it all required additional process to do the thing the community wanted over what the code allowed for. And so what the code allowed for wasn't the development that people wanted to see, and the development that people wanted to see were all things that took more process than doing it, to the code. So we did, like I said, create the new Uptown Public Realm District, created 2 main zones, that residential core and the mixed use core. Some of the things that did was it, we thought about new buildings, and if we look at some of the historic buildings in Uptown, they're really at like a 4 to 6 story height, and so thinking about how, if new buildings are going to be taller than that, then maybe they have to set themselves back. And so that 4 to 6 stories that you see in kind of the older buildings in Uptown then are reflected in newer buildings, even if they're wider. That we're thinking about parking and changing it so that people aren't providing surface parking, given the density that that they wanted to see in their neighborhood, and that they wanted to see wider sidewalks, especially on side streets. And so it was something that we started to require out of development as it came into the neighborhood. And so here's just kind of showing that when you think about those upper floors and how you start to step them back. This is not a Pittsburgh example, but an example of what it was that we were trying to achieve. Looking at the environmental performance again, so what we did was we changed what required stormwater management. So that there were smaller projects that we created through the zoning that did require them to do some stormwater management where they didn't have to in the past. We also, were able to work with nonprofit partners like the Green Building Alliance to actually, as developers were coming in, to have them start to do some advisory green building review. And what that was it ended up being a service that the city, because of its partnership with Green Building Alliance, was able to provide for free. But what it was making architects and developers think at an early stage around some of these goals that the community wanted to see around energy and energy efficiency. And we wanted to restrict demolition. And so, another thing that, as like I said, from the very beginning of this, that the community was afraid of was the loss of their character and people knocking down buildings to build surface parking lots. It was a big discussion, especially as we were building in the process of planning for building bus rapid transit, which is now a project which is getting close to being underway. And so if we were going to build this rapid transit through the 5th and Forbes corridor, we didn't need parking in the same way that we may need parking in other areas of the city. And so in this case, we eliminated our minimum parking. We actually put maximums on how much parking we could, people could use. And then like I said earlier, or like I showed earlier in the graphic, we did require parking structures to require some of those community infrastructure amenities that they wanted to see, which the image is again here. So how did we do that? And so what we did was we created what's called the performance point system. These goals in the plan, aren't something that we can require. So that, so the things that we have on the screen here, energy efficiency in buildings, renewable energy, affordable housing, they're not things that, under law that we can require of developers in a lot of cases. So what we did was build this system so that we were able to meet those by allowing people to build higher. And so, whether it was preserving the character of buildings in Uptown as something that could get points, it was something that kind of created this system that allowed developers to choose what worked for them out of those community goals to try to be able to have, to then be able to get more building, which, obviously to them, means, more opportunity for them. But how we can do that in a way that also gets community goals and realizes those community goals. So, this is just showing some examples of that, where the basic requirements for the, for that district were that the maximum height was 60 feet. And if you back to that map that showed what the heights were otherwise, although it was low in some places it was actually up as high as 400 feet was the maximum height. And so we said, you can't go over 60 feet unless you're doing these performance points, unless you're kind of providing some of these amenities that we want to see, understanding that people want to build higher than 60 feet in this district. So, all right, well, I'm going to rehab an existing building and I'm going to go and create greater energy efficiency than I would normally. That would allow me to go up to 90 feet, or, I'd do those things. I'd, build a green roof on my building, and I provide affordable housing at 20% of my units. Then I can go, kind of up to the maximum, up to that 180 feet. And so what it did was, like I said, it created this menu of options, for developers to, be able to build higher if they wanted to, but only build higher if they're providing amenities that the neighborhood wanted to see. And so, then, through developing the zoning, we then worked to model out what that meant the neighborhood would look like, under that zoning, as we thought about that, and as we thought about what Uptown would become. And, and obviously the way, doing this was, then, doing this, through the planning process, that zoning is one way in which we're implementing the goals of the community. you know, in the Uptown Eco Innovation District, for example, other ways that we were working to meet the goals of the plan was by implementing bus rapid transit and implementing it in a way that, you know, really was in line with the community, thinking about that district energy system and how we're able to build it out. Thinking about how we applied that to development. So this is the Fifth and Dinwiddie. This is Fifth and Dinwiddie in Uptown. This is the proposal that was built for, you know, for a pretty major site in the neighborhood. And, you know, and this was the site that actually went through a development process, you know, with residents to create this in a way that then, you know, was a development that reflected those goals. And so they, you know, in this case, these were some city and redevelopment authority owned properties that we had. And we knew that we could use that to leverage getting developers in to work with the community and build, you know, build affordable housing, build energy efficiency into these developments that they were seeing. And then I talked about kind of that advisory green building review. You know, we've been doing that specifically with larger agencies in Uptown as a part of this. And one specific example is there's a new proposal, actually it's been approved, for the Vision Rehab Hospital in Uptown. It's a larger building that you see with the parking garage adjacent to it. We've worked, you know, as a completion of the plan to be designing a trail system in the hillside between Uptown and the rest of the Hill District. We've been using that plan to think about improvements to open space, and so one of the open spaces integrated into the neighborhood is the Tustin Street Park. Thinking about how we can expand an adjacent community garden, how we can actually use the street to create more opportunities for open space, and then how we can use public art actually in a part of that. And we actually created a wireless mesh network in the public park. Created a that was combined with a public art opportunity to upgrade that space. And so all of these were improvements that are planned, or many are actually underway. There are a series of websites here. Since we'll be sharing the presentation, you'll have these, but it all gets to kind of all of these projects in Uptown that were things that came out of the neighborhood plan that we did. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and take any questions.
Thank you, Director Dash. Does anyone have questions about neighborhood planning or the Uptown Eco District, Eco Innovation District?
Well, as that was mentioned, in communication, which is key. So I think about when you are hired in a firm, agency, any employer wants to know what your communication skills are in oral and written communications. But from what I remember, or I know, I think I know, I don't know for sure, but I think I know that that is intended for staff to staff. But as we said, we're challenged with communicating with staff to residents. And the more technology we have, the less communication we have. I mean, we do. So I think that is to be challenged. Because even though, I mean, I had heard this earlier, that, the etiquette of this Zoom and trying to get your information, like you have the floor, you have the platform, but then the residents or the participants or audience has to fit into a chat box, which sometimes is difficult, knowing when to speak and when not to speak. So we still have to become better at what we do in communications across the field, across the community, and across the nations. Thank you.
No, thank you, and definitely agree. I mean, whether it's a lot of the Uptown work actually happened prior to the pandemic, where we were able to have street fairs and do things like that to be able to try to get the word out to people. Now, as I know Leah's kind of integrated you all into the Engage PGH platform. We've been trying to do that during the pandemic with with online engagements. while connecting with folks like 311, so that for residents who may not be able to use some of the online features of the Engage PGH platform, that they can call 311 and speak to a 311 operator and use it that way. And I think that obviously once we move forward and through the pandemic, obviously it'll open up a lot more ways for us to be able to communicate again with residents.
And I would like to, compliment you all. Give wonderful oral presentations here, but we all can't be here. So we have to figure out how to take it back and how to be precise in what you say and say it to others, which is difficult because you do so well. So I can just say that we'll try to be better at what we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. And I think it is difficult. I think it's, as we all know, we are recording these sessions. So we will, they're being posted on the YouTube channel, which of course is not necessarily accessible by everybody, but we do hope that these sessions are able to be viewed by people fairly far into the future, as long as this information is relevant. I also think it's interesting to think about, the ways in which online engagement and other forms of engagement have opened up since the pandemic started. I know that there's been a lot more opportunity for us to include American Sign Language interpreters in a lot of our public meetings and events. The city also has a language access plan that we've been building out for several years, and we're now able to invite language interpreters into online public forums, which is something we weren't able to do before. So it's definitely always a learning experience, and we definitely appreciate that feedback. Okay, so it looks like there are not questions for Andrew on the neighborhood planning. So how about we take a 5-minute break? It's 7:45 now. We can come back at 7:50 to hear from Chris in zoning. Okay. So thank you to Anthony and Director Dash for those first two presentations. We will move on to Chris Young from zoning for our last section. Chris?
Hi there, and welcome to Zoning After Dark. I'll be your host today. My name is Chris Young. I am the Special Projects Operations Manager for the Division of Zoning and Development Review. Sorry. And yeah, let me start my presentation here. Hope you all had a good break. All right, so like I mentioned, I'm with the Zoning and Development Review Division, which is part of city planning. We kind of focus more on the operation side of things. As have been mentioned a few times before, this involves a lot of permitting and zoning work, which I'll get into. So it's a good group, good sized group. I'm not sure off the top of my head how many people are in the division, around 20, I want to say, maybe a little bit more. It's a mix of zoning review specialists who do a lot of the day-to-day permit intake and review, as well as a few planners who do a lot of the kind of larger scale development review. A lot of these permits can really range from a single residency home, like for a small project, all the way up to one of the big development projects that you hear about in the news. So it's really an interesting kind of cross section of what's going on in the city. I think a good place to start, because we might forget sometimes, but zoning is at its most highest level kind of definition is a way of mediating the wants and needs of one property with the wants and needs of their neighbors and their larger community. So you've already seen some good examples of this as we went through the neighborhood process and some of the other plans. This is really about kind of getting everyone on the same page and making sure that everyone's working together. So with that sort of introduction, I'm going to focus mostly tonight on sharing a bunch of tools that we have, different websites, services that we use that you guys have access to or will have access to. All these links you don't have to worry about right now. They'll be going out after the presentation, but these are all different websites that can help you kind of stay in touch with what's happening around you, the developments, the applications, a lot of this kind of more complex information. We've been working to try and get more of it online, make it more accessible and easier to kind of dig into this really important stuff that can sometimes be a little confusing. So to start that off, we have a nice new website called Civic Central. You see a screenshot of it here on the right. This is a map-based website where each of those little dots represents some zoning records. So this website allows you to search for active zoning and development review records, and you'll see where each active permit is, what stage of the process it's at in the system, as well as a description, applicant name, address, a lot of that information, clicking on any of these little yellow dots. The blue dots are historical records. So these are already approved or completed permit applications for zoning and development review projects. And let me switch over real quick. I think you can still see the screen. Yeah. So I'll just show you, quickly how this website works here. So I already have an account. I highly recommend creating an account on this. That'll unlock the historical records as well as some more search options. But generally, you can search for different neighborhoods, council district, wards, if you want to search by ward for some reason, and address, a lot of different stuff like that. Or you can just browse, check out what's going on around you. So I'll pick one at random here. This is an idea of kind of the information that this stuff holds. This is one, active ZDR for this area over here. This looks like it's going for before the Historic Review Commission.
Do you want to say what ZDR is?
Yeah, so that's a zoning development review permit, for short, ZDR. Yeah, thank you. Zoning development review application. Yeah. So, this is the kind of information that can be really handy when you're trying to find out what's going on in your community. So you would know kind of, the short description of what the project is, the status of it. You can click here for more events and see the history of what this application has, kind of gone through. It's been through a few different review cycles now. So, it's been a back and forth with our reviewer and the applicant to iron out details and stuff. So it's a really nice tool for kind of, seeing what's going on around you. As I mentioned, the search function, once you have an account, you can really dial it in. You can look at different records, different specific records, such as the ZDR, or, consolidations and subdivisions, historic nomination, master plan, zoning process. So clicking these on and off will kind of filter that for you. You can change dates, active versus historical, application numbers, and like I said, neighborhood, ward, district. So really cool site. Excited to see, how everyone kind of uses it. Launched, I think, 2 weeks ago. So still a little bit new. And I'm happy to, show you guys around this more when we go for questions at the end of this. All right, so that was Civic Central. And now we'll have a quick little bit about our notices and upcoming meetings section. So as was kind of previously mentioned, our division includes a lot of different boards and commissions, such as Planning Commission, Historic Review Commission, Zoning Board of Adjustment, CDAP, which is, can't remember off the top of my head. There are a lot of them. The website's going to help. So something cool that we did recently was bring all of these different boards and commissions here that you can see on the right. All of their upcoming agendas used to kind of be scattered throughout our website and kind of difficult to find unless you already knew it sort of existed. So here is one combined notices and upcoming meetings page with a searchable table for, whatever's going on. So you could try a neighborhood if we want to see what's upcoming for downtown. This will show us that there is an application that's going to be reviewed before the HRC, the Historic Review Commission, on February 3rd, today. And then 2 more applications that are going before the Zoning Board of Adjustment on the 18th. So, you could check for what's going on in your community. You could check for specific developments. Here'd be a good example if you were curious about what's going on with the Target for downtown. You search that, you see, there's nothing here for it in an upcoming meeting, but there have definitely been meetings about it. You could check the Planning Commission archive, one of these archives down here. It has been before Planning Commission. And then, same layout, Target. And here you can see past meeting agendas. So each of these will have the description, applicant, I was able to search it because the keyword Target was in both of these. And it'll have their application, agenda, plan of laws from that meeting. Meeting minutes for those that have approved meeting minutes. You can go through and, review all of these after the fact. So some more exciting sections of the website. For a full list of all of the upcoming meetings, you can see the 2021 meeting calendar, as well as, a short description and more information, links to different things for each of these. So our commission, contextual design advisory panel, it's a tricky one. Development activities meetings, or DAMs, historic review commission, HRC, naming commission, planning commission, zoning board of adjustment. It's a lot to take in, but you'll have all of these links in the handout after the meeting. You can go through and kind of peruse what's available. Most of these, I think with the exception of CDAP, are public meetings. They are ones that you can attend or listen into. They're Zoom meetings for those who are actively involved in it or testifying during the meeting. They're also live streamed on YouTube if you just want to kind of tune in, during your day. So yeah, you'll be able to find more information about all of those on our website. So here's a little bit of a nerdy one, but I think it's kind of cool. This is our zoning map, which is hosted by our GIS team. And this will actually allow you to search throughout the city and kind of find out, what is your house zoned for? What does your neighborhood look like? You can see all these different sections, and the map, clicking on any of these sections will give you links to more information about what that zoning designation means and different details about it in the code. So kind of neat, fun way to spend an afternoon. And then this brings us to our One-Stop PGH website, which is our new one-stop spot for all city permits, or getting to be all city permits. So if you've already heard from PLI, you've probably heard a lot about this, or if you're going to hear from PLI, you'll hear a lot more about it then. I'll say that specific to zoning, our permits, such as the ZDR and our various applications, are on this website, and you can apply for them there. I won't go through an exhaustive list because it gets pretty hairy, but some examples of things that you might need to apply for from zoning's perspective. PLI might, permits, licenses, and inspections, sorry for the acronyms, they might worry more about your building, your house, the building itself, the wiring, the plumbing, they'll handle all of the kind of construction detail stuff. Zoning's more worried about more interested in the kind of external aspects of your house. So starting from, the designation, the certificate of occupancy, is it a business? What type of business is it? Is it a single unit residence or a 2-unit residence? Starting from there and kind of working outward, then, zoning gets involved with your kind of the edges of your property, how your property relates to your neighbor's properties, and kind of visible or, loud aspects. If you're putting in some sort of HVAC system outside, there are certain noise aspects of that would be covered in applications. So that's kind of where zoning is focused, is kind of looking at the house, facing outward. A kind of unique example is in historic districts. We actually review for exterior paint jobs to make sure that they kind of match with the historic, nature of that community. So that's kind of, a very, very quick kind of focus on what we do. So I'm excited for all of your questions after this, such as how many bees could I keep at my house? Or can I turn my entire backyard into a swimming pool? Or, could I operate an auto body shop out of the on-street parking space in front of my house? So, you can come up with some creative ones. So yeah, so One-Stop PGH, same idea. You can go in there and create an account. That's where you'll find all your applications for us, as well as other departments in the city. I'm sure you'll hear a lot about it. And to kind of wrap this up a little bit, I know this was a lot of information, and you can review it, and of course contact me and contact the zoning division as a whole. So any kind of questions about specifics, whether or not you might need a permit, kind of what the details of that permit process might involve, different things like that, feel free to reach out to our zoning@pittsburghpa.gov email that goes to our zoning review specialists, and they're a great team that will really, kind of help decode some of this stuff for you. And they're always happy to get back to you. And with that, we'll take some questions.
Thanks, Chris. That's a super helpful resource. Let's see, looks like we already have a few questions, and I believe, let's see here. And Andrew and Anthony are also still on the call. So if we have questions for our presenters as a whole, feel free to ask them at this time. Did you have something, Chris? No.
I was going to say, as a caveat, I also did start with the zoning division about 4 months ago, just barely 4 months ago. So we'll see how the questions go. But if I can't get you an answer, I can certainly find somebody who does know the answer.
Yes, but you have been with the city for many years.
Yes.
Chris comes from the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. So yes, a knowledgeable person nonetheless. Let's see. Dan?
Thanks, Leah. Yeah, hi, Chris. Thanks for the presentation. I just have sort of one quick question. I recently opened a small business, and sort of the biggest challenge that we faced in opening our small business was not coronavirus. It was a combination of PLI and zoning.
Mhm.
And so my sort of question is, one of the biggest challenges we faced was just getting the right permits. That's something where I thought I did the right thing, and I got lots of calls and emails telling me that I was wrong. So I switched it. And then my contractor went ahead, who's an experienced, knowledgeable contractor, and refiled those permits. And then we found out later that those were also wrong. So I know there's that email, the one that you just put up there. Is there sort of like any sort of specialist contact information? Because now I'm pretty well out of the woods, but when I know other people who are trying to open small businesses who don't have big budgets, who are doing it sort of on middle class salaries and big dumb dreams, is there more specialist folks that we can talk to help us avoid some of the externalities and some of the costs that come along with making those mistakes? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. It kind of highlights a lot of things that I'm actually working on right now. I mean, special projects is kind of a catch-all, but something that I am working on are kind of process guides for a lot of our most common things, to kind of try and walk you through exactly how One Stop, works, the different boxes you should be checking for kind of the most common applications, such as HVAC and some other things. And I'm working with PLI on those. So we hope to build out, kind of a more robust set of guides for the website, at least for the common stuff. Definitely, it can get very specific and get tricky quickly. I do not believe that we really have kind of specialist contacts. I will say that the emails that go to that zoning box, our group does meet actually 2 times every Wednesday, earlier today, once in the morning with just the group of planners and zoning review specialists. And it's kind of a round robin of the trickiest questions that they've gotten that week. So all of those emails do kind of come in. We'll end up, discussing them out during those meetings. And then again in the afternoon, actually, with the zoning administrator, Corey Lehman, to answer the really hardball kind of questions. So it can, it can involve, small cases like this as well as larger developments. It's really the whole bunch, all of the tricky questions. And that is kind of internally, that's us figuring this stuff out too. As far as externally, yeah, it's mostly the email from now. We're working on a way to get our call system kind of back up and running. PLI, they kind of have been at this online thing a little bit longer than we have, and they have phone numbers that you can call and kind of talk one-on-one with some of their guys. So we're kind of following suit, just a few months behind.
Chris or Director Dash, I don't know if the pre-app meeting would apply here. I mean, I know it does for developments, but just opening a business, I'm not sure, but that might be an answer.
Well, I have like a tiny bit experience. I have had so I work in community affairs, so I have residents, business owners, people who may not know otherwise, like where to go, reaching out to us for guidance. And we are often able to connect with the appropriate people. With PLI, that is usually going to be like a 311 or a general email or an office phone number. For zoning, like when it gets a little bit more complicated, like if you are applying for a zoning change or you're going to the zoning board, I know that there is an opportunity within that process to schedule like a pre-application meeting where you can have a more formalized discussion with the experts about that, but that's specifically for zoning and less so for, or for zoning board of adjustments and less so for permits, license inspections type work.
Yeah, I will say the kind of light at the end of the tunnel on all this is our nice new building downtown that's being fit out. We'll have a dedicated space on the first floor for kind of one-on-one meetings and kind of, you know, coming away from the counter and really discussing plans and laying them out on a big table. So it's certainly an issue that we recognize, and, you know, it's something we're working on.
Thank you for your help. And if you're planning at any stages to open this up to feedback or participation and input from folks who've recently been through the process, I'm very happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
Yeah, I can, Dan, I can connect you with Chris if that would be helpful, and maybe the two of you can sort of think about what that might look like. And congratulations on opening your business. That's super exciting.
Thank you.
Kelsey?
Hi, yeah, thanks. So I really am very excited that all the zoning information is going to be on Civic Central and in a map system, because I've gone through that process before of trying to find information, and it is not easy. And I use Building Eye pretty frequently and Bird's Eye View for the 311s. And I guess I just was wondering whether there was, if you could just talk a little bit about why these are all on different systems and if there's a plan to integrate the systems. Don't hate me for this, but I came back to Pittsburgh after living in New York City for a long time, and they were rolling out these mapping systems that were all kind of integrated and pointed to different agencies, and it was like some beautiful links, like, and it was just so nice. And so just wanted to see if there was a plan to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Civic Central is actually the same company that provides the software for Building Eye. Bird's Eye was kind of one of the earliest, I think, attempts at really getting a lot of this information out on the website. And I believe that was actually built in-house by our own IT department. So Civic Central is really just in the process of, it's the new product, and Building Eye is kind of in the process of switching everything over to that. You know, with our permits just going up recently, now the team, you know, the team working on it has switched to actually bringing more of PLI's records from Building Eye to Civic Central. That should be happening hopefully soon. So the idea is that Civic Central will be the kind of public-facing partner to the one-stop PGH kind of, you know, mentality of all of these records are in one location. It's happening a little bit slower because a lot of these records exist in different places. You know, again, one-stop PGH is the kind of first attempt at getting all this stuff in the same place. But previously, you know, and for a lot of these older records, they were all in different databases and different formats and different places. So it's a work in progress, certainly.
It sounds like it's moving to that. So that's
yeah,
great.
yeah, that's the goal, is to get everything on Civic Central. So.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Larry?
Thank you. I'm wondering if there is a statute of limitations of some sort or a grace period when zoning changes. I'm on the Community Development Committee in the Strip, and I think every time I've had a question or concern about building height or parking provided, somebody's come back and said, oh, you're thinking about the RIV zoning. This was approved under the old zoning. And the RIV zoning was in place when I moved here in 2018. So I'm wondering how long that can continue, how long an approved plan will be valid when the developer has not put a shovel in the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I, again, don't exactly know the specific on that. If you email me, I can definitely connect you with, you know, the absolute voice on that one, on the deciding factor on that one. It did actually come up though in one of our meetings earlier today, the round robin one that I mentioned earlier, that an applicant was, kind of grandfathered into a lot of things in a zoning district, and they were continuing with those. So I believe it is, and again, don't take this to the bank, but I believe it is an option where, if you have your applications in, you have your approval before the change, it's still an option. We can't make you go back to the drawing board on that. One interesting thing that came up with it is that the particular question that they had during the session was something where the answer was actually like kind of, it'd be easier for the developer to actually just do it by the RIV standard, or at least that's our take on it, is this weird configuration that they were trying to figure out to make it so that they still fit in the old standard, could just be adjusted a little bit and would work in the new one. So there are kind of give and takes to that, I think, where some of these updates are kind of different. They could change a lot of things, but some of them might ease up some restrictions or make certain options available that weren't before and could really change the nature of a development. So certainly go a lot of different ways.
I'll wager that if you tell a developer that the new zoning is going to make it easier or cheaper or both, they're not going to believe you.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And just to follow up on that, it does depend on what kind of approval. The various types of approvals do have various lengths of time that they have associated with them. For example, if we have, like, if you're going to the zoning board of adjustment and you're getting a variance, those are decisions that last for a year. That period of time is less than if you're getting a permit, for something and before you start work. And I think it is multiple years. I forget the number of years, for that approval. So there are definitely times, especially with the speed at which development. So usually when people come to us for permits, usually after that, sometimes, or when they come for their planning commission approval, a lot of times they're looking for funding. They're still trying to fund their project at that point in time. And so there are times where, they might get an approval from us, but may still have other steps in their process before they're ready to, to break ground. And so there are definitely some of those cases where we have some approvals where, where people haven't built on a property for years.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. See, Darrell?
Hey, yeah, thanks. I just wanted to also start off by saying thanks for the presentation. It was really well done. I always appreciate animation in a PowerPoint slide. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So, and this is a trivial question, I guess, about the Civic Central website. How soon are the updates posted when you're clicking through like the zones, as opposed to like, like when things happen in real time and when they get posted on the website? Like, what's the lag, I guess you can say, if there is any?
Right. I want to say it's probably once daily. It'll pull the records from that day. I'm not sure if that happens in the morning for the previous day or in the afternoon for the current day. But it'll be, about daily. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, that's what I want to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions for our city planners? No? Okay, well, I just wanted to say that one of my favorite things about Civic Central is that you can like follow a block, or you can kind of like outline an area and get updates about that area, about any like permits or changes that are coming through, which I think is just super helpful in terms of, instead of having to go digging for new information about your neighborhood or your street or whatever area you're interested in, you can actually be proactively updated about it, which is something I think we were missing before. So that's a really cool feature, I think, in Civic Central. Okay, well, let's give some clap emojis. This is our, replacement for not being in person, and being able to thank you for your presentation tonight and for all the hard work that you do at the city. I will stay on if anyone has questions for me, but other than that, I think we can call it a night. Thank you, everybody.